Hello grade 12, so welcome to the last quarter of your grade 12 training. And for this specific learning episode, we'll be dealing with animal form and physiology. Two words that are often interchangeably used is anatomy and physiology, but what is the main difference between the two? Let's understand. So first, let's have anatomy. So human anatomy, from the Greek words ana, which means up, and tome, which means to cut, is often defined as the study of structures in the human body. Anatomy focuses on the description of form or how body structures at different levels look. You must remember that anatomy has two major sub-branches. We have gross anatomy and histology. Gross anatomy studies macroscopic structures. For example, the body, the organs, and the organ systems, or those structures that can be visible to the naked eye without the aid of our microscopes. On the other hand, histology studies microscopic structures as well as cytology, which deals with cell. For example, we have the tissues for histology and cells for cytology. So oftentimes, in histology and cytology, we make use of microscopic slides and we tend to observe them under a microscope. After anatomy, we also have physiology. And human physiology studies the nature of the human body. Nature in the sense of how structures at different levels work. Physiology focuses on function or how structures at different levels work. And anatomy and physiology are intimately related. Body structure functions depend on their form. The way structures work depend on the way they are organized. So understanding physiology requires an understanding of anatomy and vice versa. Some living things contain one cell that performs all needed functions. We have this as the multicellular organisms, and they are made of many parts that are needed for their survival. These parts are divided into levels of organization, and there are 5 levels of organization. First, you have the cells, which is the basic building block of life, and a group of cells would form a tissue. Group of tissues combined together will form a whole organ, and a lot of organs will form or will comprise a whole organ system, and finally and eventually leading to a whole organism. By now, you are aware that humans have a variety of functions to do in order for them to survive. And you might also conclude that with this variety of functions, might as well they have a lot of tissues within them, and they are correct. So for easier retention, let us divide the categories of tissues into 4 major classifications, of course, depending on their respective functions. So what are these functions? We have tissues that are involved for connection, for protection, for movement and locomotion, and of course for transmission of signals. Based on these functions, we can see that the 4 major tissue types are connective, epithelial, muscular, and nerve tissues. Let's have them one by one. First, the connective tissue. Connective tissues are known to provide support, bind together, and protect tissues and organs of the body. Blood and bone are good examples of specialized connective tissues. Connective tissues consist of 3 main components. We have the cells, protein fibers, and an amorphous ground substance. Together, the fibers and ground substance make up the extracellular matrix, whereas the other tissue types, the epithelium, muscle, and nerve tissues, are largely made up of cells. The extracellular matrix is the major component of most connective tissues. Let's talk about epithelial tissues. From the word epi, which means above, this type of tissue is found above everything else in the body, giving it its function of covering and protecting the body. Now let's have this diagram, and as you can see, epithelial tissues lie on a basement membrane. Sometimes it is known as the basal lamina, and this thin layer serves as a boundary with connective tissue and as a substrate to which epithelial cells are attached. Now you might be asking, how do we classify these epithelial cells? We have 2 ways on how we can classify them. First, based on the shape of the epithelial cells, and second is on the number of layers of these epithelial cells. Let's first dwell on the shape of the epithelial cells. So we have squamous epithelium, which are made up of thin, flattened cells. They form the lining of mouth, lungs, and capillaries. And of course, they allow exchange of gases and materials. The second type is the cuboidal epithelium. So from the name itself, they are made up of cube-like cells. They are present in kidney tubules and are secretory and absorptive in function. The last type of epithelium tissue based on their shape is the columnar epithelium. They are made up of long column-like cells with generally nuclei at the base. They are present in the lining of stomach, intestine, salivary glands, and they are also secretory and absorptive in function. Based on the number of layers, we have two types of epithelium tissues. We have the simple and stratified. Simple epitheliums are made up of one layer of cells. On the other hand, stratified epithelium are made up of number of layers of cells. So based on its word strata, which means layers, so it must have a number of layers within it. Does the word muscle make you think of biceps of a weightlifter? Muscles such as biceps that move the body are easy to feel and see. But they are not the only muscles in the human body. Many muscles are deep within the body since they form the walls of internal organs such as the heart and the stomach. As you can see on this animation, muscle tissue is characterized by properties that allow movement. Muscle cells are excitable, meaning they respond to a certain stimulus. They are contractile, so they can shorten and generate a pulling force. When attached between two movable objects, contractions of the muscles cause the bones to move. Muscle tissues can be classified functionally. We have its classification as either a voluntary muscle or an involuntary muscle. Voluntary refers to whether the muscle is under conscious control, while involuntary movements are those that we cannot control. Aside from the functionality classification, it can also be classified morphologically. Is it striated or non-striated? Striation refers to the presence of visible banding within myocytes. When we say myocytes, these are the muscle cells, which occurs due to the organization of myofibrils to produce a constant direction of tension. The striation is due to the regular alternation of the contractile proteins actin and myosin, along with the structural proteins that couple the contractile proteins to connective tissues. By applying the above classifications, it is possible to describe three forms of muscle tissue which perform the wide range of functions described. First, you have the skeletal muscle tissue. Skeletal muscle mainly attaches to the skeletal system via tendons to maintain posture and control movement. For example, contraction of the biceps muscle attached to the scapula and radius will raise the forearm. Some skeletal muscle can attach directly to other muscles or the skin, as seen in the face, where numerous muscles control facial expression. Skeletal muscle is under voluntary control, although this can be subconscious, for example, when maintaining posture or balance. Morphologically, skeletal myocytes are elongated and tubular and appear striated with multiple peripheral nuclei. Next, we have the smooth muscle tissues. Smooth muscle tissue is found associated with numerous other organs and tissue systems, such as the digestive system or respiratory system. It plays an important role in the regulation of flow in such tissues. For example, aiding the movement of food through the digestive system via peristalsis. Smooth muscle is non-striated, although it contains the same myofilaments that are just organized differently, and they are also involuntary. Smooth muscle myocytes are spindle-shaped with a single centrally located nucleus. And of course, the last type is the cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle tissue is found specifically in the heart, where cardiac contractions pump blood throughout the body and maintain blood pressure. As with skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle is striated. However, it is not consciously controlled and so is involuntary. Cardiac muscle can be further differentiated from skeletal muscle by the presence of intercalated discs, which control the synchronized contraction of cardiac tissues. Cardiac myocytes are shorter than skeletal equivalents and contain only one or two centrally located nuclei. And the last type of tissue in our body is the nervous tissue, which is characterized as being excitable and capable of sending and receiving electrochemical signals that provide the body with information. Two main classes of cells make up nervous tissue. We have the neuron and the neuroglia. Neurons propagate information via electrochemical impulses called action potentials, which are biochemically linked to the release of chemical signals. Neuroglia, on the other hand, play an essential role in supporting neurons and modulating their information propagation. I hope you have picked onto something, and let's discuss it on our synchronous class. I'll see you then. Thank you and God bless.